It began here, on a cold, gray day in December, 1863, on the banks of the Missouri, at the muddy little village of Omaha, in Nebraska Territory. And here, 1,800 miles west, where the Sacramento and the American rivers meet, at the new capital of California, Sacramento. At the groundbreaking ceremonies for the Central Pacific Railroad, Governor Leland Stanton was addressing the crowd.
I congratulate you upon the commencement of this great work, which is the result of the state of California and the Pacific Coast. Yes, to the nation itself.
Collis Huntington, Vice President of the Central Pacific Railroad, was understandably cynical about the difficulties of construction. Who could build a railroad across mountains like the Sierras?
If you want to be jubilant over the dragging of the first pipe, go ahead. I don't. Those mountains over there look much too ugly, and I can see too much work ahead. We may fail. Anyone can drive the first pipe, but there are many months of labor and unrest between the first and the last pipe.
Wood. Wood for ties to support the iron rails, and the driving of the spikes began. The Central Pacific started east towards Omaha. Near Omaha, the Union Pacific was looking westward across the plains. The financial and supply problems of construction were staggering. One day, in mid-November of 1865, General William T. Sherman rode to the end of the track.
This is a great enterprise, but I hardly expect to live to see it completed.
The Civil War had ended. Supplies and labor were becoming more plentiful. Charles Crocker, construction supervisor for the Central Pacific, began to hire Chinese immigrants. Out on the prairie, General Jack Casement and his brother Dan had contracted with the Union Pacific for track laying and much of the grading. By spring 1866, the track layers, working several miles behind the graders, were laying better than a mile of track a day. They attacked the level Platte Valley with 100 teams of horses and 1,000 men.
They have killed my game and my buffalo. They did not kill them to eat. They left them there to rot where they fell. Were I to go to your country to kill your cattle, what would you say? Would that not be wrong and cause war?
Summer brought intense heat across the prairie. Work was a gigantic effort. When winter came, driving blizzards raked the open plains, making work impossible. Beginning not far from Omaha and continuing all the way to Utah, physical hardship took its toll. Harsh working conditions and raids by Native Americans caused many to die. Those who fell often left only personal belongings to mark their passing.
A group of 3 men left last Friday to see the placement for a cut of about 5 miles from here. It's been snowing since that night. They should have been back 3 days ago. We still haven't seen them.
This morning, the entire party laid out a sidetrack for our temporary bridge. We heard last night that the Indians were fighting hard yesterday. They killed 2 men in our forward party.
In 1866, the Union Pacific wintered west of Omaha at the fork of the Platte River. The construction crews became restless during the winter months. They were eager for a change of pace. The result was this first hell on wheels called North Platte. This type of town followed the railroad crews all the way to Promontory Summit in northern Utah. As the Union Pacific remained idle in North Platte during the bitter cold winter of 1866 and 67, 1,000 miles to the west, the Central Pacific was storming the Sierra Nevada. The torrential spring rains in the Dutch Flats area had subsided, and the army of Chinese immigrants, which now numbered 10,000, began tunneling through the solid granite toward the summit of Donner Pass. For 2 years, they would labor in the bitter cold granite caves, and with simple tools, immense endurance, and courage, accomplish a feat of excavation and construction never before equaled in railroad history. The Summit Tunnel was to be the longest on any railroad, 1,659 feet through solid granite.
Now, the Chinese experiment has proved eminently successful. They're faithful and industrious. Many of them are becoming experts in drilling and blasting, and the other departments of rock work.
With black powder, hammer, and chisel, they moved forward at the agonizing rate of about 8 inches a day. As the titanic snows of that winter began to bury the summit in a 40-foot fall, the Chinese gangs carved snow tunnels from their shacks to the excavations. In some instances, the camps were carried away by snowslides, and the men were buried. Many of them were not found until the snow melted the next spring. Working round-the-clock shifts, they seldom saw daylight through that long and bitter winter. The Central Pacific laid only 39 miles of track during 1866 at a cost of $8 million. But those 39 miles may have been the most difficult ever surmounted by any railroad. The crushing snows and 0-degree weather that had confined the Union Pacific's track force to North Platte was followed by devastating floods in spring. But despite the floods, the Union Pacific reached Cheyenne in mid-November of 1867. In April of 1868, Casement's work team moved over and down the west slope of the Wyoming Black Hills and founded Laramie. As the graders pushed west, the country became more and more desolate and sterile. 1868 was a remarkable year of progress for Central Pacific's James Strobridge. His Chinese graders and Irish track layers put down 350 miles of track across the Nevada desert at better than a mile per working day.
The alkali is always in our throats and nostrils. Many are bleeding at the lungs. The water too is unfit to drink, and even useless for making steam, owing to the foreign substances held in solution in it.
By Christmas week, 1868, the Union Pacific tracks had reached Echo Canyon, Utah. With the United States Congress and the heads of both railroads unable to agree on where the track should meet, both railroads went dashing across Utah from opposite directions. The race was on. Each company was trying to reach Ogden first, and thus control the traffic and trade of the Great Salt Lake Basin. The Union Pacific reached Ogden first on March 3, 1869. A month later, its tracks had reached Corinne, 25 miles to the north and west. By then, the Central Pacific was still west of the northern part of the Great Salt Lake, and since no meeting point had yet been agreed upon, the grading gangs of both railroads were pushing on as fast as possible. All across Promontory, in a final burst of fierce competition, the railroads were building grade alongside each other in opposite directions. This frantic competition finally ended on April the 9th. Promontory Summit was the connection point agreed upon. All grading ended 2 days later. The following week, the track layers had narrowed their gap to only 50 miles. And in a final burst of enthusiasm, the Central Pacific laid 10 miles of track in one day. The Union Pacific sent engine 119 heading for Promontory, the last end of track. Leland Stanford's special train, pulled by a locomotive named Jupiter, advanced down the Central Pacific line. The morning of May 10th, 1869, was bright, clear and cool at Promontory Summit. A telegrapher's key awaited the hand that would tell the world that the Atlantic touches the Pacific.
We have got done free. The spike is about to be presented.
What was it the engine said? Pilots touching head to head, facing on a single track, half the world behind each back.
D-O-N-E. Done.
The celebration at Promontory was modest, but elsewhere,
There can never be, in the history of railroad enterprise on this continent, another occasion so full of cause for triumph and mutual celebration as that we celebrate today. The printing press, the steam engine, the telegraph. Why, it opens a whole new era.
that first thin line of iron rails was a fact, and more than that, a prophecy, a portent of things to come. And they came fast. There was the swift extermination of the once great buffalo herds. Hunters and supplies were carried right into the field by the railroad, and the hides transported back to eastern markets. The Indian Wars ended. With the buffalo gone, the way of life of the Plains Indians disappeared. This was the end of the frontier, symbolic only at first of what soon would be. The myth of the great American desert destroyed by the national attention focused on the building of the railroad, and thus on the land it traversed. Then came the great human tide of immigrants, flowing out of Europe to America. They were carried into the far heartlands of the nation by the railroads. For decades, railroading was to dominate the American imagination. In the span of one man's lifetime, it would help build the United States into a world power. This was the beginning of something new, a new force ramming forward, the spanning of the continent by iron rail.
Carson Price? Oh my
This is the last spike. See, so when they put the track in for the east, and west, they put these spikes
See
in.
these telephone poles? See this guy put telephone poles in, they're stringing this wire for telephone lines. Isn't that crazy?
This one's the iron. So it looks like
That's a mouse trap. That's poison, mouse poison.
Mommy,
what?
mira, move over. Mira, move over.
I've been on that narrow gauge out of the England, the storage bin. Yeah, that's a fun little ride, you know. Only ride it one way though. Well, the Union was so big for kind of started off, and by the time they started building, there were no rideable trains on Chicago. Central Pacific for
get up to if you had a chance?
probably get a cruise at 65 or so.
Easy.
Huntington, you know, like Kansas University. Like there's a realm that owns a business in Huntington in LA. And the library at Kansas. It's actually his nephew, really. It's his money. Married his aunt.
My dad's people, they're actually blacksmiths. So, yeah, metalworking was in my blood. That's why I look at a lot of stuff and I'm like, is that period or is that later on? You know? Yeah, no, as like your linkages and all that, that's all to tighten up and check your bolts. Right. And again, this is welded. This is a cast, one piece cast saddle and cylinders. Oh, okay, okay. And the one the only brakes. You had to slow down then? They'll come around back here.
Or they have shoes on those, like,
The only brakes are on this rear. Oh, they're wood. Yeah.
Hey Greg, can you make your
No, that was done with that. If you wanna go back on the platform, I'll show you.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Golden Spike National Historic Site. For your safety, please do not.
Here's your brake wheel.
Alright, so, but it is mechanical then, it's not
Mechanical.
1869.
May 10th of 1869. Absolutely right. What do you mean, no?
It says right here on the Golden Spike, presented on May 8th, 1869. Let's see that.
Pacific Railroad ground broken January 3rd, 1863. Completed May 8th of 1869. Where did you get this spike?
At your gift shop.
Yes.
Yeah, but it's authentic.
It is authentic. Great buy, $55.99 nickel brass, 22 karat gold plating. That is my unabashed commercial. Both dates are correct. The May 8th date and the May 9th or 10th date are correct. It was supposed to happen on May 8th. Now, May 8th was a rainy, ugly day, and it didn't happen on May 8th, but it didn't happen because it was rainy. It happened because the Union Pacific had not arrived yet.
Sit down in the shade.
Ta-da! The Union Pacific has not arrived yet. And the reason the Union Pacific had not arrived was because, did you tell them this story? I hope not. No, you should never. Okay. Dr. Durant, who was the vice president of the Union Pacific Railroad, had not paid his tie workers in over 90 days. They, knowing that they wouldn't get paid once the ceremony was completed, they kind of kidnapped him. They sidetracked his car in a little town called Piedmont, Wyoming. It's up by Evanston, doesn't exist anymore. And they wouldn't let him go until they were paid. And he was irate. Send for the army, he shouted. And he was just blustery and vocal like Durant could get. Nothing happened until they finally did get the money. And they got the money, and they let him go on his way. And as he left, they were coming down Weaver Canyon. And Weaver Canyon, there's a bridge that the supports had gotten loose on the bridge. And the engineer would not allow the locomotive to be taken across that bridge. So the engineer said, we'll bump the cars across, we'll telegraph ahead for the next locomotive in line, and they can take you on up to Promontory, which they did. The next locomotive in line was the number 119. Now, ladies and gentlemen, you will have a part in the, oh, by the way, Durant will be coming on that locomotive today. He's on the locomotive, he'll be coming in. Sometimes when he gets off of the locomotive, the audience boos. Now I tell them, please don't boo Durant. But they do it anyway. So, I'm just saying, that's what happens sometimes. Okay. Now you will have a part in the reenactment, and you will have your lines memorized. Now there are people up here on the stage, we haven't done this for a while, so we have some cheat sheets, and there's a lot of us who don't have our lines memorized, but you will, and there'll be a test at the end of the show. And this is what you'll have to say, so repeat after me in a very loud voice, right? Hip, hip, hooray! Hip, hip, hooray! Hip, hip, hooray! That was pretty anemic. There were about 800 people out here, so you have to play the part of 800 people. So there's at least 8 of you. You play the part of 8 people. Just you see. So stand up, okay? Now what we got to do is we got to stand up. We got to wake up that engineer in that locomotive down there, or he won't come in. So are we ready? Are we ready? Are we ready? Hip hip hooray! Hip hip hooray! Hip hip hooray! What? Again, hip hip hooray! Hip hip hooray! Hip hip hooray! All right, thanks. You can be seated now. Thank you. right, the first gentleman down off the locomotive is the fireman. He's going to put a safety chain around the wheel so it won't go anywhere. The next gentleman off the locomotive has a very long beard. That will be Dr. Durant. Yeah, there he is. That's Dr. Durant. So,
The date is May 10, 1869. The location is Promontory Summit, Utah Territory. An unlikely place for the culmination of an undertaking that will mark the end of the Old West and the beginning of the New. And yet they have come. The wealthy and the poor, the laborer and his boss, the Chinese and the Irish, people of many races and many creeds, even a few adventurous women and children. The gathering is both festive and anxious, awaiting that miracle when two common, ordinary railroad spikes driven into an ordinary cross tie will link a continent. A gentle breeze is blowing under an almost cloudless sky. The thermometer on the Central Pacific Telegraph car registers 69 degrees. Above the babble of voices can be heard the hissing of the steam locomotives, which heralds the beginning of a new era. And then General Mills steps forward and signals for silence. And so a nation, as well as those gathered here, awaits as the hopes, prayers, and dreams begin to unfold on this 10th day of May, 1869. And you are here.
Bulletin, keep quiet. When the last spike is driven, we will say done.
Ladies and gentlemen, on behalf of the officials of both railroads, the Union Pacific out of Omaha, Nebraska, and the Central Pacific out of Sacramento, California, I bid you welcome. We are met this day to commemorate the completion of a project which is a remarkable example of the vision, determination, and the labor of thousands of men in a union which this very day, will be consummated forever. We are assembled today to link the ends of the earth, to complete a new and shorter route between Europe and the Orient, and to join the raw riches of the American West with the finished product of the industrial East. We are also met today with mixed emotions, with great joy that in a combined effort and common cause, the brains, muscle, and sweat of many men have joined together this great adventure under the guidance of Almighty God. But we are also met with great sorrow. But it was with profound sorrow that we remember and pay homage to the hundreds of men who in construction of the Pacific Railway gave their lives that you and I might stand here this day on this very sacred occasion. It is, however, noteworthy that the Pacific Railway has been completed 6 years ahead of the time allotted for its construction. Among those in attendance today, we are honored to acknowledge that there are several Pacific Railroad officials who will not be taking part in the ceremony. Also present are reporters and photographers from some of our nation's finest newspapers. From the Utah Territory, representing the Governor Brigham Young, is Bishop John Sharp. Bishop Sharp, where are you, sir? There you are, sir. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you for coming, sir. Did you bring your whole family, sir? That's big. Okay, and from Utah, Ogden, Utah, the mayor of Ogden, Mayor Lauren Farr. Are you here, sir? There you go. Mayor Farr. Thank you. Are you running for re-election, sir? Yes. Yes, okay. Make Ogden great again, yes, sir. I have two words for you. Ice cream. Okay, just remember, ice cream, Mr. Farr. Okay. Also, today, our music has been provided by the 10th Ward Band in their shiny new uniforms from Salt Lake City, Utah. And also present are the men, officers, and ladies of the 1st Infantry and their regimental band and their Commander Major Milton Cogswell. Finally, let me direct your attention to our telegrapher, Mr. W.M. Schilling of the Western Union office in Ogden. With the miracle of electricity, Mr. Schilling is keeping the entire nation apprised of the proceedings as they transpire. And now, to unite us in prayer with our Creator, may I introduce a man who's come many weary miles to be with us this day. He's the Reverend Dr. John Todd of Pittsfield, Massachusetts. Reverend Todd.
Bulletin, hats off, prayers being offered.
Thank you, our Father in God, God of creation, God of providence, maker of heaven and earth. We together here this day upon the height of this continent to do homage to thy wonderful name, and that thou hast brought this mighty enterprise, combining the commerce of the east with the gold of the west, to so glorious a completion. We implore thy blessings upon thy children here assembled, and upon thy children everywhere, that peace may flow into them as a gentle stream, and that this mighty enterprise might be unto thee as the Atlantic of thy strength and the Pacific of thy love, through Jesus our Redeemer. Amen.
Bulletin, we have got done praying. The spike will soon be presented.
Thank you, Reverend Todd. Now it is my pleasure to introduce a fellow resident of Sacramento, Dr. Harvey W. Harkness. Right down here, brother, Mr. Harkness, sir. Who will present two ceremonial spikes, one to Governor Stanford of the Central Pacific and one to Dr. Durant of the Union Pacific. They will then place these spikes into pre-drilled holes in the Laurelwood cross tie. Now, ladies and gentlemen, make no mistake, these are not ordinary spikes. Oh, no. No, these spikes are made from pure California gold.
Mr. President, the last rail needed to complete the greatest railroad enterprise in the world is about to be laid. The last spike needed to unite the Atlantic and the Pacific, a new line to travel commerce, is about to be driven in its place. To perform these acts, the East and the West have come together. Never since history commenced her record of human events has she been called upon to note the completion of a work so magnificent in conception, so marvelous in execution. California, with whose borders and whose citizens Pacific Railroad was inaugurated, desires to express her appreciation of the vast importance to her sisters and her sister states of great enterprise, which by your joint action is about to be consummated. From her mines of gold, she has forged a spike. From her laurel woods, she has hewn a tie. And by the hands of her citizens, she offers to become a part of the great highway which is about to unite her in close fellowship with her sisters in the Atlantic. From her bosom was taken the first soil. Let hers be the last tie and the last spike with them, except the hopes and wishes of the people that success of enterprise may not stop short of the brightest promise. This golden spike was donated by Frank Marriott, publisher of the San Francisco Newsletter. Its inscription reads, "With this spike, San Francisco Newsletter offers its homage to the great work which has joined the Atlantic and the Pacific Oceans this month, May 1869. In conclusion, I should like to draw your attention to the spike gift of Davis Hughes spike. On the three sides, the names of the railroad officials, and on the fourth side, a sentence. May God continue to the unity of our country, and this railroad unites the two great oceans of the world." Beautiful.
Well played, gentlemen. Thank you, Dr. Harkness. Now it's my pleasure to introduce Mr. F.A. Tridle, United States Railroad Commissioner and candidate for the governorship of Nevada. On behalf of that state, he's here to present a spike made of solid silver from the Comstock lode in Nevada. Mr. Commissioner Tridle.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. From the iron of the east to the gold of the west, Nevada adds her link of silver to span the continent and wed the oceans.
Thank you, Commissioner Tridle. We are privileged today by the presence of the Honorable Anson P.K. Safford, the newly appointed territorial governor of Arizona, who has delayed his journey to present a force spike made of gold, silver, and iron on behalf of the Arizona territory. Governor Safford.
Ribbed with iron, clad in silver, and crowned with gold, Arizona presents her offering to the enterprise that has banded the continent and dedicated the pathway to commerce.
Well done, gentlemen. Thank you, Governor Safford. And now, friends, it is not only my duty, but my honor and privilege to introduce a man of vision, a man of courage, a humanitarian, and one who is highly esteemed by those of us who are privileged enough to call him our friend. He is a Californian whose farsightedness has contributed in large measure to the completion of this great work. Ladies and gentlemen, the President of the Central Pacific Railroad, Governor Leland Stanford.
Gentlemen, the Pacific Railroad companies accept with pride and satisfaction these gold and silver tokens of your appreciation of our undertaking to the material interests of the whole country, east and west, north and south. These gifts shall receive a fitting place in the superstructure of our road. And before driving the last spike in completion of the Pacific Railroad, allow me to express the hope that the importance which you are pleased to attach to our undertaking may be in all respects fully realized. This line of rails connecting the Atlantic and the Pacific and affording to commerce through transit will prove, we trust, a speedy forerunner of increased facilities. The Pacific Railroad will, as soon as commerce shall begin fully to realize its advantages, demonstrate the necessity of rich improvements in railroading, so as to render practicable the transportation of freight at much less rates than are now possible under any system which has been thus far anywhere adopted. The day is not far distant when 3 tracks will be found necessary to accommodate the commerce and travel that will seek transit across this continent. Freight will travel in only one direction on each track, and at rates of speed that will answer the demands of cheapness and time. Cars and engines will be light or heavy, according to the speed required and the weight to be transported. In conclusion, I will add that we hope to do ultimately what is now impossible on long lines. Transport coarse, heavy, cheap products, all distances, at living rates to the trade. I thank you.
Thank you, Governor Stanford, for your astute and timely remarks. I don't know about you, but I didn't understand half of what he said. But there's one thing I did catch, and I think you did too. He's predicting 3 transcontinental railroads. We haven't completed this one yet, and he's predicting 3. What a visionary. Now, Dr. Durant was scheduled to speak to us next, and I regret to inform you that he's suffering from a severe and I suspect self-inflicted headache, and will not be able to speak to us at this time. And in his stead, we've asked General Grenville Dodge, Chief Engineer of the Union Pacific Railroad, to say a few remarks on behalf of the Union Pacific Railroad. General Dodge.
Gentlemen, the great Senator Thomas Hart Benton proposed that someday a giant statue of Columbus should stand and be built on the highest peak of the Rocky Mountains, pointing west, donating this great route across the continent. You have made this prophecy today a fact. Today, this is the way West India.
Thank you, General Dodge, for your very brief remarks. Now, ladies and gentlemen, we've almost reached the moment which you and the nation have been waiting, the driving of the last spike.
I'll have to get on.
Governor Stanford, we're here right on time, so just have some patience. But first, Mr. L.W. Cole, president of the Pacific Union Express Company, will make a final presentation in the form of a silver-plated spike mall. At that time, Governor Stanford and Dr. Durant, if he's back, will make a few ceremonial taps on the tops of the spikes with the mall. Mr. Cole.
Railroad officials, honored guests, and friends, it is the privilege of the officers and workers of the Pacific Union Express Company to express their appreciation of your enterprise, and have expressed this silver hammer expressly for this occasion.
Very well expressed.
Beautiful.
Be gentle. Try not. Press your pedal. Never tap. Never tap. Well done. Now, historically, let me explain what's happens next. Now, the spikes were taken out of the tie and given back to the people who brought them. The lower wood tie was removed. In its place was put a common ordinary pine tie. So the actual last spike is a common ordinary iron spike driven by a common ordinary spike ball. Dr. Durant and Governor Stanford will drive that last spike now. Ladies and gentlemen, that time has arrived. Mr. Schilling informs me that Boston and New Orleans have wired that they're ready and waiting. Indeed, throughout the length and breadth of the whole nation, coast to coast, north to south, people everywhere are anxiously awaiting. When Mr. Schilling gives the announcement over the wires that the last spike has been driven, bells and whistles will sound across the nation. In San Francisco and many other cities, fire alarms will ring out. And in Fort Point, the cannon will be fired once again in Fort Point. And who knows, in Philadelphia, perhaps the Liberty Bell will ring again. What do you say? Yes. Dr. Durant, Governor Stanford, are you gentlemen ready? Let's finish this road.
Bulletin. Where am I here? Dr. Durant has adjusted the spike. The spike will soon be driven. The signal will be 3 dots for the commencement of the blows.
All right, can we drive her home?
Powerful swing, Governor. Powerful swing.
This is the one we're going to hit.
Hit it hard. Oh! Swing and a miss.
Well, he was just right. He decided.
Dr. Durant, give it a try.
You can do any better there, Doctor. I'm not sure.
That's it. Hit the one in the middle, Doc. Hit the one in the middle. Here.
Maybe see 3 dots in the road.
Whoa! Railroad down, railroad down. Finish this job for us.
Bulletin. To the country. D-O-N-E. Done.
Ladies and gentlemen, henceforth, there is but one Pacific Railroad of the United States of America.
Bulletin. Promontory to the President of the U.S. Simpson Grant, Washington, D.C. The Associated Press, East and West. Final bulletin. Promontory Summit, Utah Territory, May 10th, 1869, 12:50 p.m. Mr. President, the last rail is laid, the last spike is driven. The Pacific Railroad is completed to a junction 1,086 miles west of the Missouri River, 690 miles east of Sacramento City. Signed, Leland Stanford, President of the Central Pacific Railroad, Thomas Durant, Sidney Dillon, John Duff, Union Pacific Railroad.
All right, everyone, let's give 3 cheers for the Union Pacific Railroad.
Hip, hip. Ladies and gentlemen, let's give 3 cheers for the Central Pacific. Hip, hip.
At that moment, one era ended, another began. The Golden Spike became a symbol for a better way of life, with challenges yet to be met and conquered. Thank you, boys and girls, ladies and gentlemen, for being with us today, and have a safe journey wherever you need to go. Thank you.
doesn't mind, so we're going to do it. Come on.
Stand by the train.
Jonathan, this is a boat train.
This is what you like, is to see the pictures.
Look at this. Look how cool it is. Look how cool it is. Look at this.
Should we go to the other train?
Hey, Mommy. Here we are. I think you need some food. You got it?
For some of you, going to see the 119 showing up here in the business. Pretty exciting. These steam locomotives are really gems, and we're so privileged to have them here at James Lake Michigan Church. If you would have been here in the early 60s, I wasn't, but if you may have been, the place was pretty fascinating. We've seen some sagebrush, grass, cattle.
Hi, now, the Jupiter. So as you back head towards Kings Pass, I just want to remind anybody that is taking photos, you're welcome to stand out in the grass. Turn back side. Turn back side. Okay. All right, everybody in their places. Highball to 119.
Okay, it's time for us to go, I think.